Welcome to The Way Home with Laura Smith, the show that brings you wonderful guests, helpful advice, and uplifting stories. The Way Home. Live inspired. Here's your host, Laura Smith.
I have a guest today that is actually going to deep dive into a topic that has captured not only millions of parents around the country and the world, but is been huge with this administration in terms of what has been brought to light by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the focus on autism in children, the epidemic of it. It is a topic that I think is really, it's gone mainstream, as we have seen, that so many parents, so many people are dealing with the topic of autism and how it affects their lives. Someone who has done incredible research on it and brings something and in somewhat as a format as a whistleblower to the public with his incredible work. Dinesh Dani. Dinesh Dani is a defense contractor. He's a data architect. He's an author, a full-time parent to two sons. He has a master's degree in science and a bachelor's in technology, in addition to experience with bioinformatics, computational chemistry, and molecular modeling. And I say these credentials just to show that you come from a background that has the capacity to do that kind of deep dive and research that I think is so needed, especially in these times when there's such a divide on the topic of autism. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dinesh. I just really want to hear all about your incredible book, which is Autism Causes Unveiled: The Hidden Traumatic Brain Injury at Birth Causing the Autism Epidemic. This book is a game changer, I have a feeling. Tell us what's happening with it and how it's being received.
Hello, Laura. Thanks for having me here today. Thanks for that awesome introduction. So this book on autism, it definitely it has been described as something that most parents need to hear about. Most parents are unaware of what caused autism in their kids, and other parents that are looking to have kids, they want to find out if there's anything they should avoid or what might be causing this injury. But I call it a birth injury. And that's where I'm kind of a whistleblower, in the sense that there is a big campaign for hiding this kind of birth injury that's happening in hospitals across the country, around the world, and simply because birth injury compensation tends to be expensive, and there's powerful forces behind the scenes trying to keep this away from the public. So
yes, and I'm so grateful though that, because I would say that it's been over the last 30 years since I had my daughter, since autism was the public has been looking for answers, I think, for many years. So now here we are. We have this new administration with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who truly seems to care about this issue, about autism and what is causing it. And do tell us if you and your research is in line with a lot of what he is discussing. He talks a lot about vaccinations and their potential for causing autism. I know you come from a little bit different direction than that, but you must be grateful, though, that at least it's being discussed in this day and age, finally, in a little more mainstream way.
Exactly. And, I definitely thank RFK for bringing this subject to the forefront, because it is often dubbed as genetic and written off as something genetic that's happening out there. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But genetics is the easiest to blame. It's the easiest causation that blame. And unfortunately, RFK probably found that out the hard way, because if you were watching the cabinet meetings, the Trump cabinet meetings that were publicized, came out on TV, you'll notice that he mentioned birth interventions as the cause. He had found the cause, and it was birth interventions. And that's exactly my point of view. And I believe they even might have looked at my book, my previous book that I had, and I'm the only voice on the internet saying that it is a birth injury from certain birth interventions, and he was echoing that until it suddenly turned out to be Tylenol. And I think that was because the powerful forces that are engaged in the cover-up got to them as well, and they potentially were scared about the ramifications, the legal Armageddon that would come at them if they let out the true cause, if they inform the world of the true cause, which is a birth injury from prolonged labor induction, so.
Labor induction. So medicines that we've been hearing for years about, Pitocin, one of them that's given to many, many, many women. So that from that position, when you just said, and let's just touch on this for a moment, the whole Tylenol the thing, that discovery sort of, it feels like that came out in addition to vaccination injury. Would it be your position, Dinesh, that Tylenol really has no effect whatsoever on autism if a woman takes it during pregnancy?
So there were mass starts against Tylenol last year. They've been around for a while. And last year, a judge in California dismissed the case against Tylenol. So it was already a case that existed and was dismissed. So they picked on it probably because they figured it must be the easiest scapegoat. Unfortunately, what happened after that is the Texas Auditor General ended up suing Tylenol, the company Kenvue, and then if you listen to the latest from RFK, he's trying to walk back his claims about Tylenol itself. So
you say that perhaps he has read your book. I mean, I would think that he would be very interested in reading your book with the massive amounts of research that you've done on this over the years. Do you have any access to RFK Jr.?
Not at this time. I did send my books, a couple of copies of my book to him before the announcement came. So I'm sure he's had his eyes on them. And I've written a letter to him as well, along with it. So I'm sure he's aware. He's pretty much aware. He's probably under other compulsions to divert the true cause. Unfortunately.
But at least he's not completely a head bearing in the sand and also a protector of the establishment that would seek to, like you say, put the cause of autism onto something like genetics when there's no truth in that, correct? So so you're saying, what would be the percentage of autism cases, both of your sons being on the spectrum of autism? What is the percentage that you would say are affected by birth injury or birth intervention injury that happens at birth when inducing labor? How many percentages of people who have been diagnosed with autism are actually, is it from that? Or is there any other research besides yours that has been done on that?
Yeah. So that's the deal, right? So research already exists pointing to the association between labor induction and autism. What they said, the North Carolina birth records were looked into by the Duke University and a researcher by name Simon Gregory from Duke University. He looked at the North Carolina birth records and said, oh, it's perfect correlation between labor induction and autism. And that, unfortunately, what happened there was they tried to suggest a mechanism of how labor induction can cause autism. And they looked at only chemical possibilities. They were like looking at, okay, it's a hormone. It is going to downregulate the oxytocin receptors in the brain, and that could cause autism. The truth of the matter, although, is that it is traumatic brain injury. It's physical contractions of the uterus that, when they deploy excessive contractions. Now, some women don't dilate very easily. They can potentially carry their pregnancy all the way to 45, 46 weeks. They're just healthy women, and they can, carry that pregnancy for longer. Unfortunately, what happens in the current medical system is there's a template for, okay, after 40 weeks, it becomes risky to carry the pregnancy, and that's the standard template they try to fit everybody into. And unfortunately, when you induce somebody that would have delivered a natural baby naturally at 46 weeks, you induce them at 40 weeks, you have to deploy excessive contractions to get that cervix dilation. And when you do that, there used to be limits on how much contractions you can deploy before you have to call for a C-section. Unfortunately, what happened is in 2018, some flawed research came by that said, that wasn't even looking at this brain damage aspect. Now, Pitocin actually carries a brain damage warning on its label. It actually carries a brain damage warning on its label, which specifically says it's traumatic brain injury to the central nervous system. Okay, and it comes from the uterine motility, which is movement of the uterus. So this is a drug which creates a physical movement. It's like contractions, and excessive contractions can lead to the fundamental neuronal networks of the baby getting severed. Like it's silently happening. It's the brain is getting pounded in place. When you're getting through that cervical dilation phase of labor.
Yes.
Okay. And then what happens is like the pushing stage, the brain deforms, and any scarring that happens in the dilation stage gets hidden by the pushing stage. If the brain deforms during the pushing and comes out conical, so the scarring is gone, and there's no real evidence of what happened there.
And so are these doctors misinformed and therefore prescribing the Pitocin when it's not necessary, and B, not knowing and understanding the effects, even when it says on the actual packaging that it could cause brain defects? Are the doctors turning a blind eye to that? The certain ones are they not being taught in medical school what the potential is for these? I mean, how long has Pitocin been around? It's been a while.
Pitocin was introduced in 1980. 1980 was when elective induction of labor became a possibility with the introduction of Pitocin. And ever since, you would see that the autism curve started taking off, really. And that's because they introduced this possibility of traumatic brain injury during birth. And when it comes to doctors, initially, when it came out, they probably did not understand what was going on. But then they later found out, and somewhere in the mid-90s, the protocols for labor induction were established, only to be dismissed again in 2018. So there was these protocols in place between mid-90s and 2018, and then they got removed. And I believe they got removed because if they are going to tell that, people in the know, if they say that too loudly, then they are subjecting themselves to lawsuits, right?
Right.
And now what happens is, like, after 2018, you cannot really sue for birth injury from excessive contractions simply because the standard of care has shifted. Now they are allowing induction to go on forever, and basically you cannot get a obstetric witness to come to court and say that this doctor did not adhere to the standard of care. So that's where it's stuck in limbo. And it's.
It sounds evil. I mean, I'm just putting it right out there. It sounds evil to me. They are literally foregoing the protocols that studies show that would keep babies safer and their brains safer. And not only that, but then they're blocking you from being able to sue them or have any sort of accountability on it. I can't imagine in a country such as ours, the most advanced country medically in the world, a beacon of light for so many, and yet these types of practices happening all the time. Now, tell me, between 2018 and today, 2025, was there a spike in autism again in the numbers of births?
I do anticipate that there's going to be a spike in numbers. Basically, the CDC only counts autism at 8-year-olds, in 8-year-olds. So, it's been exactly around 7 years since the protocol was dropped. So in the counts that come out in 2026 and beyond, you will notice an even higher spike in autism numbers. Now, and to your earlier question, about 50 to 60% of autism out there, based on the numbers and the data I've collected from other parents, around 50 to 60% of autism comes from this abusive labor induction. Now, it is multifactorial causes. There are other ways you can damage that brain, particularly during that perinatal times, just before birth, at birth, and just after birth. The second highest cause I did come across was C-sections, which is the opposite of that too pre-planned C-sections, planned C-section, right? So simply because it's the other extreme. The contractions are apparently there to help the baby transform from that fluid-filled environment, the lungs, to transition to a air-breathing environment. So the contractions apparently help in releasing enzymes and prepping that lungs for that air-breathing environment. And that doesn't happen if you directly C-section the baby out. So that is what is causing the second highest. The second highest.
So, I just have so many questions in our limited time to talk today. My guest is Dinesh Danny, and he has written this incredible book, Autism Causes Unveiled, rather a whistleblower of sorts, the hidden traumatic brain injury at birth causing the autism epidemic. So now we've started with the brain injury with induction. That is, you think, the largest the largest amount of people that end up on the autism spectrum. Then, you just spoke about C-sections. I grew up in Brazil, in South America, and 99% at the time that I lived there in the 70s and 80s, 99% of all births were C-sections. So you would go to the doctor to find out that you were pregnant and find out when your baby was going to be due. And on the same day that you did that, you would schedule your C-section. Okay. They automatically did that. Now, I won't even tell you the reasons why, or I must, because it's so crazy you wouldn't believe it. But at the time, I was told that it was because of vanity, basically. Brazilian women, for their men, the men liked it when things, in that area remained more intact and very and not stretched out, so to speak. So they would prefer a C-section so that a woman could retain her, her youthful size there. So it just, to me, that's crazy. But I don't remember seeing a lot of kids with autism that came out of that time necessarily.
Right. The autism that comes from C-section is not very severe. It can easily go undiagnosed. No, those kids are, there's various levels of autism out there. And from planned C-sections, you get mental health issues, it's not really the speech delay that defines autism as autism, right? So.
Right. That's interesting to me. Very quickly, because we only have about 4 minutes left together. The other thing being vaccines. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was really having the conversation nationally that he felt that, yes, indeed, that vaccines were a procuring cause of some of the autism that was happening. I know that you have an interesting take on the vaccines and basically about if someone like me had a natural birth without anything, with any induction or any medication or anything, and I get my child vaccinated, those vaccines wouldn't have an adverse effect on my child. But perhaps somebody who did have labor induction and then got the vaccines, then the vaccines could have been also affecting their ability to come up to have autism. Is that true?
Exactly. Vaccines are that big elephant in the room, and we need to address those. So what happens is, like, when the child has pre-existing brain injury, right? They have damage to the what we call the blood-brain barrier, and there's inflammation going on. The body is trying to recover from that damage, and when you introduce live vaccine viruses into that system, right? It causes retrogression of skills that parents notice. And what it really is certain viruses can get across that blood-brain barrier, and get into the neurons of the brain. Now, once they get into the neurons of the brain, they're able to migrate to the guts of the person. And your gut is your second brain. It's got the second highest concentration of neurons in the body, and they migrate there and cause gut dysbiosis, which in turn interferes with the chemicals that the brain chemicals that the gut produces. So it becomes a vicious cycle after that. And parents notice 2-3 days from when a child is vaccinated, a previously brain damaged child is vaccinated, there's visible loss of skills. And that loss is not just with vaccines, it's with a lot of other viruses too. So if the child gets, say, COVID, for example, is a virus that can get into the brain. It can get into across the blood-brain barrier and into the brain. Now, if a autistic child gets COVID, you can see that he's retrogressing in his skills. Just after that infection. So it's vaccines, but it's vaccine viruses, any virus, even any infection, even outside of the vaccines. It's
very complex, and you have spelled it out so incredibly in your book. I just had, we have 2 minutes exactly. One yes, no question. The epidurals that women get as they're in labor, have you found any consequence of that on autism later in children? Has there been any research done?
The epidurals are potentially not directly implicated, but then they make the birth process apparently slower. Is what some researchers showed, which means the longer the baby is in the mother, once the water has broken, like once the amniotic fluid is lost, you need to get that baby out within about 8 hours. And if you don't do that, then that can cause issues as well. Birth is something so natural that's been happening for years together.
Yes.
And just that, it's become a medical event now. And while that is useful in many cases, there's also this kind of issues that are happening and that need to be dealt with. Yeah.
Dinesh Dani, my guest. I know that you have an initiative called Autism Parents Initiative. What is that website?
Yeah, it's the Autism Parents Initiative, autismpi.org, AUTISMPI, P as in Patrick, I as in Igloo, Autism Parents Initiative.org.
And I think you're literally doing God's work. You're furthering the conversation even deeper into the research, which is just so important. Dinesh Dani, the book is Autism Causes Unveiled: The Hidden Traumatic Brain Injury at Birth Causing the Autism Epidemic. Again, Autism Causes Unveiled is the book, and autismpi.org is the website where you can come together as a parent and get more information. autismpi.org. Thank you, Dinesh Dani. I could have had a whole hour with you. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you for your work. It's really remarkable. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I appreciate it too.
Thank you for listening to The Way Home. Each and every one of you are a part of the Way Home family, and we just wish for nothing but great happiness and safety and good health and prosperity, success, everything that you can possibly have to make your life a good one. And we'll see you next time on The Way Home. I'm Laura Smith.
Podcasts by Federated Media.